welcome to our, I suppose, I'd like to think of it as a celebrity interview, but Andrew will not forgive me for using that phrase. It's a discussion and an interview with Andrew Keeling, the composer of the work we've commissioned for tonight's concert. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Peter Davison. I'm the artistic consultant to the Hall, and I've worked closely with Craig in putting this weekend together. It works like this. If things go well, I get the credit. If things go badly, Craig gets the blame. Anyway, very soon we'll be able to hear the climax of the weekend, which is a triple bill of music making around the guitar in an ensemble context. And we specifically asked Andrew if he'd write a piece for a combination of guitar and mandolin, because we know that that's a combination close to Craig's heart. And he produced a piece, Riverborn, which we'll talk about shortly. But first of all, let me introduce you to Andrew. He was born in Staffordshire, but has lived most of his life on the Fylde Peninsula, in and around Blackpool, Thornton Cleveland. And he was trained at Huddersfield Polytechnic back in the 70s, I suppose, getting another century, where he studied guitar and flute. He studied composition relatively late in life, coming to it in his early 30s, but studied with notable names such as Nicola Lefanu, Tony Gilbert, former head of composition at Royal Norton College, and then later on a PhD with John Caskin at the University of Manchester. So he's no slouch when it comes to composing. He now composes professionally and teaches guitar and flute up on the Fylde. But anyway, Andrew, I wonder if you could begin perhaps by explaining a little bit about how your slightly unusual history in music has influenced you as a composer. I mean, how has this coming to composing late perhaps changed the way you write otherwise?
Well, I sang in the cathedral choir, and then when I got to about 13, I got into psychedelia and prog rock, and like we all did in the good old days, and the war as well, you had to be there. And so with me, essentially, it's been either choral music or song. I suppose that's the centre of what I do. I just think I look at things very simply. If you can't remember something melodically, for me, it's just a waste of time. You just tend to think, I just think melodically, and that's it. And so I suppose that's always had a bearing on what I do. When I got to public school, right at the end of the 1960s, there were all those prog rock bands like King Crimson and Yes, and it was just there at the time, and so I listened to it, and I suppose that stuck. You know, when you're a kid, you pick things up, and that's what it was about, really. You know, and I suppose there were bands like Free and Cream and all those bands around at the time. Those great blues bands. But it was King Crimson really who really shook me, because they did a load of things. They weren't just a rock band. They were a jazz band, and they wrote great songs. They were a post-Beatles band, and all that stuff really. So I wrote a Robert Fripp, who was a guitar player, and that moment in time, it stuck with me ever since. And I think that's where it all began. And so after I left school, well, even at school I was in bands. I had my own band. After I left school, I joined bands semi-professionally, and it went from there.
Did you, this was the point where you just picked up a guitar or wanted to go with this? Yeah. And was that before or after your experience with King Crimson?
That was before. I think I had bands at school. There were bands. We were in a student comedy around the edge. There were all these studies, and you had the Beatles coming out of one, and Zeppelin coming out of the other, and Cream coming out of the other, and Free coming out of the other. And so you were sort of besieged with all this information. And there were guitars lying around. Everyone in those days had guitars, acoustic guitars. They were copying Arnold Guthrie or, you know, any of John James or any of Burt Jansch, who was blues players, and they were playing Beatles songs. And so the tendency was just to pick up a guitar and have a go.
And did you feel even at that early stage that there was some sort of tension between what the progressive rock people were doing and what was happening in the world of contemporary classical music, which was this very modernist sound world.
Well, I had nothing to do with that. I went to school on a music scholarship, so I played the flute, and so I was playing Bach and one rehearsal, and I was playing my own music and T-Rex and all these kind of things, and Black Sabbath in my own band. And so there was this conflict always, I think, between what I did.
But did you perceive that gap between what you were doing and contemporary classical music, or between what rock was doing and classical music as a whole?
So I wasn't really very aware of what was happening in classical music, to be quite honest with you. It just didn't really interest me very much. Even when I went to Huddersfield and studied flute, even then, there was this was much later, back in the 70s, there was a contemporary music course, and they were studying Vega and so on. And I was more interested in Nick Drake, actually, and King Crimson's that. That's what I did.
Were you aware of the extent to which they were using sort of classical jazz techniques?
I was certainly aware that they were using jazz techniques, but I knew nothing about jazz really. All my improvisation skills just came from playing over single notes and rock bands, which of course I did later.
Yeah. But you had some sort of formal training through being a chorus, so you knew sort of Anglican choral tradition music, which is a kind of reasonably good grounding in the basics of harmony and counterpoint, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't get that out of your bones, and that's what I find. If you've sung Howells and Stanford and Bird and Gibbons and so on, then that's as a child, then it's rooted in your bones. It's going to stick with whatever you do.
Should we hear a little bit of guitar music that you wrote back in 2003? This is a work called Scarlet Letters. I haven't got time to hear it all. We'll hear the opening of it, and that gives you some idea of the kind of music Andrew's writing, although he assures me that his style is evolving and changing, and probably he wouldn't write this now, but it gives you some idea of maybe what it isn't. But let me see if we can get this machine to work. They're notorious. So Andrew, that was Scarlet Letters. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of that? It was played by Abigail James, who was also...
It was based on a book by Nathaniel Hawthorne called The Scarlet Letter. And I just thought Scarlet Letters was a good title, so I just stole the title, and that's what it became. It's a piece, when I hear that now, I think it's the end section really, which is the best part of that, because it's a song, and it's made of probably about 12 sections, but the end section sort of resolves into a song at the end. It's all fairly straightforward. I think it's fairly straightforward music. So
I mean, your music relies on what you would say are quite simple ideas, which you work up into bigger forms through sort of strategic repetition, if you like. And repetition, which we'll find when we come to Riverborn, is quite an important part of the way you create structures.
Well, I just think that I think at the centre of what I do is song, and it's always been there. And very often I write a song, and then sometimes use it as a song itself, simply as a song, and sometimes it has potential for further development. And so, for a piece like Scarlet Letters, that was certainly the case. I felt that it could develop into something else, and that's just the way it went at that particular moment in time. It's sort of improvised composition in a sense. Although I do spend time obviously putting things onto paper, I think those first initial ideas are really important. Just white heat of the moment ideas. Improvisation for me is important.
And the guitar generally is a bit of a maverick instrument in classical music generally, because the big name composers haven't written an awful lot of work. I mean, obviously there are traditions, the Spanish tradition, South American tradition, where there are quite large bodies of work. So when you decide to write music for guitar, are you conscious that you haven't really got a tradition of your own to work in, or do you find yourself borrowing traditions from elsewhere?
Not really, no. I mean, much of what I do is done spontaneously, but on the other hand, I've got a reasonably good ear, and I think when you've got a good ear, what tends to happen is you hear something, you absorb it, it comes out. And it's natural, it's just, you can't help it, you know. So I'm very aware of that. You know, whatever I've been listening to does come out. There's no cheating. You know, I can't.
Is that when you have to be quite careful what you do listen to?
Yeah, sometimes better to nothing. Just be lazy and just do very little.
And would you say that when you conceive music like that, that you might begin picking up an instrument and trying a few chords? Is that how it might work?
Well, that piece is quite weird because it uses an F sharp tuning, so the third string is tuned down to F sharp, which I actually used writing from the lute. So I wrote it using this drop F sharp, drop G tuning, and when you start using D tunings, which of course I do quite regularly because I do write songs, and it creates a whole different world harmonically. You know, you can. I mean, Nick Drake was my big influence in that because his tunings were, particularly in the early days, extremely strange. But what he did, he used to use these really weird tunings, cap over frets, and then use standard chords. And if you listen to his music, you know, it sounds as though he's doing these really strange chords, but actually he's not. He's using standard chording, which is remarkable.
I mean, we heard it at the concert this afternoon. I was very struck by the range of colour and character you can get out of the instrument. And is that something, again, you consciously try to exploit in a particular mood or contrasting moods? Or?
Sometimes. Not really. I don't like using the sounds just for the sake of using sounds. You know, I mean, in Riverborn there are a couple of places where there's one place where I do use it, you know, this Gato thing. And but for me, no, it's not really that. I don't think even Scarlet Letters I did that particularly. Harmonics sometimes, and Riverborn certainly uses harmonics. But no, not just for the sake of using them. I think techniques have to be used purposefully. There's no point in using techniques just for the sake of using techniques. I don't see the point in them.
Is there something about the character of the instrument itself that also perhaps draws you to it? As it's sort of more introverted?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I was thinking about exactly when you're listening. I like the guitar because you can sit there by yourself and you can play it. And you've got an orchestra at your fingertips. You haven't got to have a billion players playing it for you. You know, it's great just to pick it up. I've always done it. You know, it's intimate.
Mm-hmm. It is, I suppose. That comes over in the Scarlet Letters pieces, very much like a sort of reflection.
Yes, I really like it.
Yeah.
I've always liked it.
But also as an instrument of serenade, or you know, it's associated with the tradition of also the tradition of courtly love and the troubadour.
Yes. Well, it's funny you should mention that because, of course, Jacob Perryman, the American lutenist, asked me to write some pieces a few years ago. So I sort of got, I didn't really know much about that. I just did that as part of the commission. But yes, I think there's that side of it, particularly with the lute, because of course the lute has a really small voice. You know, so I suppose it's even more intimate than the guitar in a sense.
Yeah, and I mean we've got a disc here which perhaps we can play a track from of the lute songs, which this is from a disc of various contemporary composers that attempted to recreate the lute song tradition, going back to composers like John Dowland. But if I can get this, I must suggest that you talk amongst yourselves while I struggle with the technology, but let's see how we go. But I mean, the Elizabethan period has a kind of resonance for you as well. I mean, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about why that period.
Well, not specifically, apart from when I sang as cathedral chorister. I think if you've sung Bird and Gibbons and Tomkins and those kind of composers, those are always going to be part of you. With this piece though, again it uses that drop F sharp tuning, and I wrote it at the guitar one night after tea. Sat down on the settee, that was it.
It's called With How Sad Steps O Moon, with a text by Sir Philip Sidney, and it's played by Jacob Herriman and sung by Catherine King again. Anyway, here we go. This is one of Andrew's lute songs. 1, 2. Yeah, it should just, I think it just goes. And we'll get the rifle shot when it finishes. done silently. Okay, so you get some idea again of, I mean, there is by the standards of what people towards the end of the 20th century call contemporary music, but we're hearing music that's got a lyrical, sometimes even a folk-like quality that occasionally echoes the world of popular music. And obviously that's probably more fashionable now than it was a decade ago. But I mean, have you felt to some extent you've had to almost choose to stand outside the mainstream to sort of hold that line? I mean, have you had to distance yourself from some of the ideas that have been current in the sort of academic mainstream of contemporary music?
Yes.
That was a leading question.
Yeah, it became apparent to me that I'd written quite a lot of music and it had a lot of notes in it. And I just felt that in the end that you can do these things and it's great for a while, but as you get older, I just felt as I was getting older, things were changing within me. And I just felt that melodically, there was something being lost in writing music which had great complexity. And some of the stuff I did write it was complex. And I just thought I just think it's important that listeners get something from the music you write. I'm not saying that, tonight's piece, people are going to get anything from it. You've got to be very careful what you say. But on the other hand, it was just constant note spinning, and I just sort of fell out of it.
Mm-hmm. So let's come on to Riverborn itself. Tell us a little bit about how you set about writing this piece.
Right. Well, Riverborn is based on your poem, Riverborn, and it's essentially to do with the river. And I just wanted to write something which was going to be fluid, which began as nothing, a source, a spring, which became a stream, which became river, which became ocean, and then began again, so the thing's cyclic. So it has a sort of archetypal quality. It goes round and it ends like it begins. And I think it's in two pieces. The first piece owes something to Bach, and I say that Bach was at the centre of it. And at the beginning, plain song maybe, so it's nothing, it's modal. The second piece was actually based on a looping piece that I wrote for classical guitar. I went into the studio and laid one part down, improvised another part on it, improvised another part, a melody. And that's what the second piece is based on. It's just to do with looping. And it was written spontaneously, quickly, and then for the actual Riverborn, for this piece, I developed it. So it goes with what I previously said about sometimes what I do has potential for development. And I think that's probably the case.
And how did you face the challenge of the mandolin? So have you ever written anything for mandolin before?
No, I've never written anything for mandolin. No, I borrowed it. Everything was written on guitar, and so I went and borrowed a mandolin from a friend and played it through a mandolin, checked everything against the instruments. I think that's really important so that you can hear what you're doing. And I don't think you can. For me, I can't write music which is totally abstract but doesn't have a relation to sound. So it was trial and error. And of course, Alison Stevens, I sent a load of stuff to her, and she wrote back and said, "Well, I think that maybe you should do this." And so I think she was instrumental in sort of developing it.
And I mean, it's in two movements. Is there any particular reason why you decided on two movements?
It used to have three, but the middle one was dreadful, so I just chucked it in.
So the certain pragmatism operates in composing.
The middle move was like Riverdance, so I just my wife, she said it's too much like Riverdance. I said, "You're right, Howard."
So we get probably the best sort of censored version of it.
Well, sometimes these things happen, you write something and it just needs to be turfed out.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we forget, we tend to sort of romanticise and mysticize the role of the composer and what the composer does, but there are some very simple pragmatic things a composer has to be able to do if they're going to be successful. And ruthless judgment is probably one of them.
Yeah, I think just doing something and then sitting on it, see if it works. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, out.
So, what would you hope that? What do you hope the audience will take away from listening? I mean, I suppose you can't instruct them what they should, but I mean, what do you hope that they will?
Well, I hope they remember it. I hope it's melodic enough. I hope that the material is strong enough that you can remember something about it. You know, a lot of it's repetition. Because I think repetition is vital in anything. You know, the problem with writing serial music and complex music, as I did, you couldn't remember a note of it. So I just got tired of that, and so I just hope you remember it, really.
Would you say hummable tunes?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of tunes. Rhythmically, I think it's alright as well. I think you might pick that up.
And silence as well.
Yeah, silence is important.
Yeah.
And there is silence in the piece. Yeah.
So anyway, I wondered if the last 5 minutes, if anybody has a question for Andrew about the art of composing, or this particular piece, or his ideas about the guitar. Has anybody got any questions they would like to pose? Don't be shy. Anybody? Yeah, gentlemen.
You say that you sometimes write at the guitar and sometimes not. When you write at the guitar, you start and then complete the whole piece before committing it down to paper or Sibelius or Mozart or Finale or whatever. Or sometimes you go all.
I've got Sibelius, but I hate it. You know, I'm better with pencil and paper, and that's the way I work. But a lot of it is done from sound. A lot of it's got to be done from sound. I mess around with ideas first, and then if they're strong enough to me, I stick with them and then write them down. I think sometimes if you write things down immediately, you can't stand back and think about a sound as sound. You know, that's my own feeling. I think at the end of the day, I mean, music's sound, isn't it? I mean, you take away sound. That's why people like rock music. It's the sound of the thing. You know? So it's with me now. It's less an intellectual exercise. I think. I hope it is, anyway. Things have just changed.
Yes.
How do you get in mood writing music?
Sorry?
How do you get in mood with writing music? It's not like an administrative job where you've got a big...
No, you're right. You're right. I write a lot of songs, acoustic songs, and now I used to work on them and sort of, manufacture them, but I can't do that now. If a song's to work for me now, it has to come up fully formed. I can tell when it's coming up. You can feel it. It comes from somewhere. Inspiration for me is vital. A couple of my colleagues didn't believe in inspiration. Well, I just think inspiration is absolutely vital. You've got to be... I don't even think it's being in the mood. I think it's just being inspired, actually. There's a book by Jimmy Webb called Tunesmith. And Jimmy Webb, of course, is the great American songwriter, who wrote things like Wichita Lineman and Galveston. And he wrote a book called Tunesmith, and he gives these these instructions for how to write a great song. So I read the book, and then I listened to a lot of his songs, the great Jimmy Webb songs. And not one of the great songs follows any of the criteria he's put down in the book. He's one of those kind of people who sit down at a keyboard and it'll just come out, I think. So I think a lot of it is that. I'm not sure if I'm sure mood's to do with it, but I think it's just being there, doing it.
But presumably you can create an environment where you're more likely to be inspired. I mean,
sleep is a good one. I get a lot of ideas from dreams. Hear pieces in dreams, people singing in dreams, and I've got to get up. And it sounds crazy. I'm sorry about this. It just sounds daft, but that's what happens, must it? I have a little notebook. I sit on the bed and my wife bought me a torch, and it's true. And I get up and write things down.
And the great outdoors is important.
Yeah, Lake District, really important. Yeah.
But you wouldn't describe yourself, what you describe sounds a bit like a romantic composer, but would you describe yourself as a romantic?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't know. No, you can't put labels on that. I don't like labels, really. That sounds nice, romantic composer. Never thought
Anyway, well, I think shortly we'll be here. Sorry, is there another question?
Do you have a particular key for writing?
D's a nice key on guitar. It's good you're going to drop D tuning, and Nick Drake wrote all those great songs in D, like, you know, Hazy Jane.
Right, everything
Do you? Right, you have to ask that question.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good key. Yeah, open G is good. D minor is good as well. Yeah.
Okay. If there's one more question, we can have that. Otherwise, okay. Well, obviously we want to wish Andrew well for his performance tonight, and thank you very much for coming to talk to us. A couple of adverts on his behalf. If you want to get hold of his books about King Crimson, you can get them on Amazon, but they look like this. Andrew is the world expert, with the blessing of Robert Fripp, on King Crimson and their albums. He has a wonderful website, which is also very interesting, which has got a lot of information about him, including an essay by me about his work, which is, I've got the web address here somewhere, very easy to remember, www.andrewkeeling.ukf.net. I suppose the UKF is the bit you have to remember. But there's plenty on there, and there are lots of discs on there, Andrew, which probably are available on Amazon too. Riverborn Records and various others. So it's quite a big body of work, a very varied body of work. So well worth exploring. But anyway, thanks very much, Andrew. And good luck.
Thank you.
Cheers.